Welcome to another Tuesday night. It's 8 p.m. and that means I Didn't Know That, presented by Stoffer Mortgage. With me, Karaoke Bob, our host, Mike Stoffer, and tonight, a conversation with Dean of Campus and Community Relations of Ohio University-Lancaster. We're going to do some election coverage tonight, folks, so strap in and get ready, as you know, one of the most important events in our country's history is about to take place, and we are bringing you live coverage right now. To begin that live coverage, let's bring on Mike Stoffer. Good evening, Bob. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
You know, I can't complain.
That's a great accordion sound that you've got going on.
Yeah, isn't it? Isn't it terrific? So first, let's let everybody know that that's royalty free. So, as is true with anything that you do in life, you get what you pay for.
It sounds royalty free, by the way.
Yeah, right. I didn't have the actual Air Force marching band here. So
well, you can't have everything. Yeah, no. I'm sure you sent them. I'll send them a letter out and see if I can get them for next election. And I got my sweet WONE bowling shirt happening tonight, because it's really the only thing that has red, white, and blue on it all at once, and it's got this sweet American flag on the back. You see that all right, Mike? My friend? I love it. That is great. All American. Just have your name on there, Bob.
It does, of course.
Yeah, so let's see that. There we go.
There
WONE Bob.
Absolutely. When I was on the 97.5 WONE Bowling League, I was probably like 2002, 2001, something like that.
And how were you as a bowler?
Not bad. I mean, I think that year I carried like, it was like
Did you break 100?
I was like 150 average, like 140, 145, 150. Something like that. Okay. So I'd have, those games where I'd have, 110, and then I'd get close to 200 every now and then. So
did you put a spin on the ball when you
I'm more of a hook guy.
On the
so I was a hook guy, so there's a little spin, but it wasn't that big curvy banana thing. The guys start like at the middle of the lane or a little to the left, and then get it to hook all the way around in the pocket. I was more all the way to the right, and then kind of gave it a little flick of the wrist to kind of get in that pocket.
You got to like teeter on the edge of that gutter, and
then
the
gutter. Yeah.
Cut in.
I mean, if you weren't watching your, if you weren't watching your angles real well, you could just plop it right in the gutter when right at the beginning. But I've done that before. I also had a almost catastrophic bowling injury that did some damage to my right knee when I was young. It's not ever been right ever since. But
there's a lot of those right knee injuries that people have when they were younger.
Yeah,
right
from
shoulder
injuries.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
A real noble injury for sure.
Yeah. Well, I have a friend of mine who's got a trick shoulder. He slipped in a shower. And Bob, I happen to like that mug that you have there. Let's see that again one more time with a little sip. And what have you got in that?
I've got red wine, actually.
Red wine.
I just spilled.
Very good, Bob.
On my white bowling shirt that I've had for years and years and years, and now I put a wine stain on it.
Well, it was bound to get there.
God.
And you have the I Didn't Know That logo on both sides of the cup, right?
Yeah, this is an ambidextrous mug.
See, now mine, I don't have it. I only got the one side, so mine is a collector's item.
Yours is it's one of those
only on one side.
What do they call that? Like when you go buy record albums and they accidentally only put a label on one side.
A blemish?
A blem. Yeah, you have a blem. That's right. And depending on
my colors are
depending on the record. Like if you got a Sgt. Pepper's with one label, you're probably, if you decide you want to part with it, you can probably send a kid through college.
Absolutely. And Bob, by the way, I see that after your Neil Sean handlebar mustache get up last week, you're filling in quite nicely.
Well on my way. Hopefully we can cover up this other chin here in the next couple of weeks. I'm looking forward to that. Or maybe I'll get this gym done in my basement and I can start using it and actually do something healthy. And instead of trying to mask all my issues, maybe I'll just actually solve the problems.
Nah, that wouldn't be
what a concept.
What we have to do now. We have two of our regulars are not with us tonight. Mark Seibert and Jared Gray. They are off on assignment.
We do have a video later from Jarrod Gray if we so
if we
choose
have time.
to.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So I know Jarrod but Mark and Jarrod are on assignment, so they are not available. And a couple little quick housekeeping items before we bring Jarrod on and give people a chance to get signed on, because sometimes I do hear that it takes them a while to get logged in because of Facebook technology and all that. They have a struggle to get in sometimes. Sure. Mugs are out. If you saw on the Facebook page, we had our very first guest on the show. She received her mug and very kindly sent in a picture, and that is Sarah Garino. She appeared on our first 2 episodes. And
she was a very knowledgeable fitness and nutrition expert, which love to have her on again sometimes if she so wanted to. Actually, I was thinking that maybe, if Sarah wished to, lock me in like a chicken coop or something for a month to retrain my brain, I would love to have that kind of intensive program.
Yeah, well, she'll give it to you. Believe me, as you know, I am under her program and have been for several months, and she's been fantastic.
And I asked her, you've lost what, close to 200-300 pounds, something like that.
And what does Mark Seibert say? Getting back to his birth weight is what he's trying to do. No, I'm down. I was 192 back in February of 2018.
So
2018, I was 192, and now I am about 162.
That's a healthy weight.
That is a healthy weight.
Where do you have do you have somewhere that you would like to be that you're not?
Probably in Brussels with my child.
Right, of course.
Who, by the way, is supposed to be our foreign correspondent and has done absolutely zero work. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, the kids.
She's currently out of the will. So mugs are coming out. We were going to be getting them out to all of our guests, and all to you and I, and Mark and Jarrod will have them. And then we're going to start getting them out to our loyal listeners. So be on the lookout for a mug in the mail, and we will definitely get them to you. Before we get to Jarrod, we want to say hello to a couple people. We got Josh Ondo with us. Steve Ingalls is with us. Hello to both of you. Lori Evans is here. Hi, Lori. And Big Dave is with us as well. And I can't see any more of my screen to be able to tell if there's anybody else here. No. So hello, everybody.
I think you got everybody that's commented. Anyway.
Oh, and Mary Jo is here. Hello, Mary Jo. Mary Jo just had a birthday on Halloween. And Ray Miller. Hello, Ray. So thank you, everybody, for clocking in. It's great to see you.
And Ray says you look like your mom.
Oh, yeah. Oh, hey, Ray. Hello. I did. Yeah, thank you very much. Ray and my mother Ray drives my mother anywhere she wants to go. My mother's like the Queen of England.
Incredible.
And Ray saves my life because my mom, unfortunately, can't drive anymore. And Ray is a very important addition to the family because she does help my mother out a lot. And I greatly appreciate that. So without further ado, Bob, why don't we bring on our guest? Bring on our guest, Jarrod. Hey, Jarrod, how are you?
Hey, guys. How you doing?
It is good. It's great to see you. Bob, are you with us? I think you froze up.
I am.
Oh, wow. Okay, so you fixed all
there was a
issues,
slight
right?
little. I changed. So against the advice of StreamYard, I decided to try Firefox tonight, and it appears to be working much smoother than their suggested browser, Google Chrome, which of course is the browser upon which every browser anymore is built on. Right. So you have to. Except for Firefox.
And Bob, by the way, you are well known for going against advice. I think when Sherry Morgan was on, she told you not to burn sage, and you burned sage.
Yeah, don't get them. 5 minutes later, like, guess what? I found a ghost in my house.
Exactly. So, Jarrod, thank you for joining us. I think everybody should know that you have done this before. You have been on several other election nights throughout the years. Is that correct?
That is radio all the way, but I miss it and I'd like to do more of it, and glad to be with you guys tonight.
And we are excited to have you.
Jarrod and I, expectations that you've had from dealing with professional outfits before, just throw those out the window and strap in for a wild ride.
Where's the mute button over here? So, Jarrod and I had dinner on Saturday night, and I'm excited to talk to Jarrod tonight. I mean, he knows this stuff to like how you know guitar players, Bob. I mean, Bob knows guitars, and you had to hear some of that before we went on the air tonight, Jarrod. But yeah. Jarrod has some deep, deep knowledge that we're going to pull out. We're going to extract as the evening goes, because I just find it really, really fascinating of what you're talking about on Saturday night. Do you have any opening observations as to what's going on in the voting as of right now at this time?
Yeah, I'd say a couple of things. Number one, it's getting tight in the 10 states that we're watching. So we're watching 10 states very closely, all states that President Trump won in 2016. We're also watching very closely 2 House districts, one in Maine, one in Nebraska. Of course, those are the 2 crazy states that allocate their electoral colleges, at least electoral college votes, at least in part, based on congressional district wins, and things have gotten measurably tight. The other thing I would say is that the states that are now reporting, so we actually have 6 of those 10 states now reporting that we're watching. Looks like by all accounts, they're doing a very good job of getting their votes in. So although a lot of people were kind of nervous that maybe that wouldn't happen, it looks like the states, and kudos to the secretaries of state that do that kind of work and their crews, they're getting the votes in.
So 101 million early voters. Did I hear that correct, Jarrod?
You got it. So, and again, we're getting closer and closer. We're well past 2/3 of those that actually voted in the 2016 election that did it early. So a lot of people took advantage of early voting, maybe for several reasons, maybe because of COVID, maybe because of fear that their vote might not count. So they've taken advantage of early voting in just about every single state. I voted early. In fact, I voted about 3 weeks ago. And frankly, it was easy. I mean, my line wasn't very long. I've seen on television and even in newsprint longer lines, pictures of longer lines. But the secretaries of state so far have done a terrific job of getting people in.
Now, I went today to vote, and I have to admit I was a little disappointed. I was hoping for lines. I was hoping for, gunfire or something. And there was nothing. I just walked right in, gave my identification. They gave me that little card. I went and slid it in the ballot box, and away I went. I was in and out very quickly. So the early voting has probably kept a lot of those people away today, but still, I've heard that there's been a lot of people out at the polls, and it sounded like more early. I don't know about the crowds as the day wore on. I did not check. Do you know anything about that? Have you heard anything in terms of that, how that's going?
Only that the lines have been abnormally long, but that's to be expected if what we're hearing is going to be true, that we're going to have maybe not a record turnout necessarily, but unusually high turnout. Now, we Americans, remember, we're willing to do all sorts of things other than go vote. We're more likely to write a congressperson a letter, go protest other than vote. Our voter turnout is actually quite low. So again, only 55% last election, last presidential election, which was a 20-year low then. But we're expecting this huge surge. So we're going to expect longer lines. And I really don't have another year to compare it to unless you would use perhaps the year 2004, which was John Kerry against the incumbent President George W. Bush, where lines were pretty long then.
Well, so why were they so long then? What was the difference? I mean, I think it's very obvious what's going on today. What's the difference back then?
Well, I'd say a couple, and it's a great question. One, I think we were hung over from the year 2000. All right. So the year 2000 was where everybody woke up and said, oh my gosh, these elections can take a long time. How is it going to get this close? So that was part of it. The other thing that, and people sometimes forget about this, in 2004, we had a presidential election, and it was a close election. And it was a late election. It wasn't as late as 2000, but we were pretty late. And actually, a lot of it hinged on what was going on in Ohio, and even more narrowly, what was going on in Franklin County, Ohio. But the other thing is, this is when we had a lot of ballot initiatives, if you'll recall, across the country. Some of them were in the form of statutory changes. Some were in the form of state constitutional changes regarding gay marriage. And that motivated a lot of people to get out in the polls, either whether you were for it or against, it really didn't matter. But a lot of people got out to the polls, and we didn't have early voting at the level we have now.
So the difference is that a lot of other issues versus, right. I think it seems like this election, it's just really one issue. It's President Trump versus Joe Biden.
Right. I think what you've got, I agree, Mike. I think what you've got today is really a referendum on Donald Trump. Right. Do you keep him or you don't? And I don't think it's hey, Joe Biden is this wonderful, great character that we need to have president. It's either you're voting for Trump because that's who you want to keep as president, or you're voting against him because you want him out.
So you had mentioned something a couple of minutes ago that I found pretty interesting, is Americans don't get out and vote. Yeah. Now, I have noticed, and I'm sure you probably know this, the United States seems to lag the rest of the voting world in percentage of people that even get to register to vote and that do vote. Can you talk a little bit about that and what the differences are? Because we seem to be very archaic, even though we're supposed to be the leader.
We are. I think it gets into a lot of different issues. Number one, we have 50 different sets of election law. So in the United States, we have some federal law that governs elections, but our federal law basically says you can't discriminate, can't harass. Okay, that's fine. But then you come down to a kind of like one level of government, and you have 50 different sets of state law with 50 different sets of rules. And that's not to say 2 or more states don't do things pretty much the same, but you have a lot of different state law. And I think it really does confuse people as to how they would go about this. Now, again, look at the issue of early voting. We have different states that are allowing different things. We have different states that are saying we'll count ballots after the election at different levels. And I think that confuses a lot of people. Now, going one step further, you have 50 different states with 50 different systems of running primaries. All right. So you add all that together, and you probably have some people are saying, look, I'm just not going to do it. I don't like politics. That's a whole different other issue. I don't like the way elections are run. I don't want to be pushed into voting. Early voting, I think, has helped a little bit with the push issue, in the sense that, I got to do it on the first Tuesday after the first Monday, according to the Constitution, right? So I think there's a lot of mishmash. I think I'll tell you what I would like to see, regardless of whether our listeners are Republican, Democrat, or going to vote Libertarian or whatever, this becomes an election that catapults us into getting higher levels. 55% in the year 2016 is, Mike, I agree. It's almost embarrassingly low. For a country that's supposed to be the lead democracy in the world. I'd love to see that get much higher. I'd love to see us get around the low 60s, maybe 2/3 of eligible voters this time around. I think that would be a great civics lesson for all of us.
I'm going to raise my hand because Mike.
Well, I saw you come back on. I saw you come back on the screen. I figured you wanted to.
Okay, so you're starting to read my cues. Great.
Well, you are breaking my stride. But
we're 10 weeks in, so it's good that you're finally starting to notice these things. I'm excited about that. So, Jarrod, earlier today I saw some information about, and maybe you can help clear me up, because I wasn't exactly clear on what was happening, but it had something to do with a judge upholding an order of how the Postal Service was processing ballots, and that they were just really unable to process the volume. What's happening there, and what is the effect of that going to be on the final tallies?
Well, I tell you what, that's a great question on the effect. I just don't know. I don't know if anybody knows, but you're seeing a lot of what I would call pre-election litigation on just those kinds of issues, right? And a lot of this gets down on to really basic constitutional law and equal protection, right? Is my ballot going to be treated the same as everybody else's, right? But remember, judges don't handle anything unless it's brought to them. right? So you've got a political party bringing a case. You've got another political party, another interest group. Judges don't do anything unless cases come to them. And we've had a lot of election litigation on just these kinds of issues. Because now I guess today's election day, so current day litigation, I guess. But I think we're going to see a lot early on. Probably some cases today. I think every judge that's able to do so is probably in his or her office realizes they may be on duty today, and certainly through the wee hours of the morning. But again, it gets down to just very basic constitutional law dealing with equal protection. Is my ballot going to be treated the same as somebody's down the street in the next precinct, in the next county, in the next state, et cetera? Especially when you think about the U.S. Postal Service, which is a federal part of the federal government.
Well, and I would imagine based on the different areas and who's got control of those areas with the gerrymandering and those types of things, I imagine all that comes into play in terms of getting votes counted and not counted.
Yeah, it does. One of the things that, it's one of the ugliest realities in American politics. You can gerrymander based on political party affiliation. That's constitutional, but you can't do it based on race. Now, we all know enough social science that we know we can generally break down social demographic groups into political parties. It's not always a perfect match, but it gets pretty close. But again, what you're saying, Mike, I think is, a political party that might be in control of this particular county, that might be in this particular congressional district, that might be in this particular state, may take one angle towards how the ballots are going to be handled. And, the other party's going to have to defend it, or the other party's going to take the lead in litigation, and the other party's going to have to defend it. So, Absolutely. What's great about election law now, it's the lawyer's right to, make a living, I guess, in a lot of respects. But that's how American democracy works. If anybody woke up this morning and thought American democracy was supposed to be easy, they're crazy. It's not. None of this is easy. And a lot of this has to do, and again, we're old enough now to remember clearly the year 2000 election, where, again, we didn't see a lot of pre-litigation. We saw a lot of post-litigation because of what took place in Florida.
So let me ask you this. Did Amy Coney Barrett's ruling surprise you? I mean, because I imagine this could probably all end up at the Supreme Court.
Yeah, it could. So it's hard to say what's surprising and what's not, to be real blunt. And again, Amy Coney Barrett is new, right? So, any constitutional scholar, we like to think we have an idea as to how somebody might vote and how their career might go. But we know a couple things about judges who become justices. Now, again, Amy Coney Barrett has an incredible pedigree, a good career behind her, and frankly, a fantastic career ahead of her. We think she may be one way. We may think she might be one of the more conservative justices on the current Supreme Court, but she may change her mind. How many cases is she going to abstain from? How many cases is she going to get involved in? And again, Supreme Court justices don't kick people out saying, hey, you said you want to be part of this, but we don't think you should. So, get out. That's not how that works. It's actually a very collegial group, and they just kind of take each other at their word in their own positions.
I just think people seem to have been a little surprised that she opted not to vote with Pennsylvania, North Carolina. Were those two states on the extension of the mail-in? Right,
and I think you're going to see some more, frankly. So the other thing is, I'm sure Donald Trump wasn't probably crazy about that decision one way or the other.
But that was kind of my point. I mean, I think a lot of people were very concerned about her being conservative. I mean, if you were on the liberal side of it, there's that concern that, you have the Supreme Court that's leaning mostly conservative. And for her to make that decision, I think that could be a very telling sign that hopefully there's going to be a lot more fairness to it than a lot of people realize.
Yeah, I think so. But the one thing to keep in mind, that's only one set of cases, and it's early, and we're not even after Election Day. So let's say, for instance, just for argument's sake, Justice Barrett's decision, and let's say she's I don't believe this to be true, by the way, but she's a very calculating justice, right? And she wants the election to go to one way. Why not abstain through the election and then maybe come back out after the election? So everybody's voted. Nobody can vote after that type of thing. I doubt that very, very seriously. I find Justice Barrett to be a very, very competent, very honorable formerly judge, and of course now justice. But again, it's early. I mean, we don't know. Constitutional scholars, people that do what I do for a living, have always been wrong too. So we'll see.
Right. So what is different this election, 2020, for Donald Trump versus 2016?
Yeah, I think that the reality is that he's playing defense. Now, you might say, well, of course he's playing defense, Jarrod. He won the last election. The problem is his popularity is pretty low. He's not a popular president going in as an incumbent into his second election. And although that's happened in the past, it's happened in the past without very good results. You think about George H.W. Bush, for sure. And even George W. Bush going into his second election was not a popular guy. In fact, a lot of people went into the 2004 election thinking this John Kerry is going to come out is the next president of the United States. But he's playing defense, and the polls really, frankly, have him down in most of these 10 states and 2 congressional districts that we're watching. In all 10, Biden has had a lead at some point. Maybe not a big lead. You look at Texas, you look at Georgia, not big leads, North Carolina, Ohio, etc., but leads in places where Trump really kind of has to, and his team, frankly, has to believe that's got to be theirs for him to hang on. So he's not able to play offense anywhere. There's no place on the map, I assure you, that he's going to be able to keep the states he had and pick up another one.
So when we talked before, there were a couple I found very interesting key differences this election versus 2016. You had mentioned Jill Stein played a big role in Trump's election.
Yeah, she did. So if you look at a lot of people like to bash the polls. Oh, the polls got it wrong. The polls really got it wrong. How could they have miscalculated? Frankly, if you go back to 2016, you look at the pollsters, they really only missed big on one state. And that's Wisconsin. Frankly, they missed big. So I'm just going to look at my notes here. Wisconsin, Clinton was up on a poll of polls by 6.5 percentage points. Trump wins by 0.7%. All right. Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate. And by the way, I'm not wearing a green tie this is for Ohio University. I'm not endorsing a Green Party. I've already gotten flack for that today. But Jill Stein wins 1% of the vote. So she had more votes than the gap between Trump and Clinton. So, for instance, if you took Jill Stein out of the race, Hillary Clinton wins Wisconsin. The same is true in Michigan. She had 1.1% of the vote. Trump 0.3%, and Clinton had on a poll of polls leading in 3.4%. Now, you could say maybe that was a miss. I don't think it was a miss because that's clearly within the margin of error. The Wisconsin reality was outside the margin of error. And then you look at Pennsylvania, which I think is the first anchor state that we're going to look at tonight, and just seeing how Pennsylvania is going. 3% of the vote in, so it really doesn't count. But in Pennsylvania, Jill Stein, 0.8%. Donald Trump, 0.7% is a gap between him and Clinton. And Hillary Clinton going in on a poll of polls, 1.9%, well within the margin of error. You flip those 3 states, and of course, Hillary Clinton becomes the first female president of the United States.
And I think it's fair to say that Green Party basically leans Democratic.
Oh, without a doubt. Yeah. So to make it incredibly clear, the Green Party is probably the most noteworthy, not the only, but the most noteworthy liberal party, clearly to the left of the Democrats on the overwhelming majority of issues, by the way. But again, if there isn't a Green Party candidate, now, you go back to the year 2000, and again, this is our playbook for kind of the future. Look at what happened in Florida in the year 2000. Let's say Ralph Nader doesn't run. Al Gore's the next president of the United States.
Right. And we don't have a Green Party this year, do we? I mean, is there somebody running for the Green Party?
Yeah, there is, but nobody of substance to the point where I think we'll even get close to Jill Stein's numbers.
And do you know who the Green Party person is?
I honestly don't know.
Yeah, neither do I.
So
that's okay. Because Jill Stein and Ralph Nader were big names, and they had some pull. Now, you had also mentioned You were pointing to, I believe, some Senate races that you thought were a little bit different this time versus in 2016 that you thought were more telling. So you take away Jill Stein, right?
Yeah.
That's a big difference because there's no Jill Stein this year. And we have some differences happening in this at the Senate level that you think are very telling, correct?
Yeah, I do.
So talk about those.
Yeah, it's Hawkins that's running for the Green Party. I actually had to look it up. So, yeah, so we're looking at roughly 13 Senate races. Now, again, the Senate is clearly up for grabs. The Democrats, if Joe Biden were to win, need a net gain of 3. And again, we're looking at Arizona, Iowa, North Carolina, Montana, South Carolina, Maine, and 2 seats in Georgia. So it is theoretically possible that we wake up tomorrow morning and we have 2 Democratic senators from the state of Georgia. That hasn't happened in a long, long time. Now, Georgia does something that is a little different. Again, election law being state law. Georgia runs runoffs. So if nobody gets a majority, you take the top 2 and you let them run it off in January. And that may very well happen with the open seat. I think that will probably happen. We'll see what happens with David Perdue and John Ossoff, which is the more traditional race. I think somebody will probably wind up with a majority there. And then we're also looking at 3 Senate races that I'm going to say just got weird here in the last week. Michigan got weird. Texas got weird. Minnesota got weird. But I would say a couple of things, getting back to your point, Mike. I don't see the presidential candidates driving a lot of the Senate races. In fact, I see it the other way around. I see some of these Senate races, especially in Georgia, especially in Iowa, maybe pushing the presidential race. And that's probably because, let's just face it, Donald Trump is not a popular guy. Joe Biden, I think people think he's a nice guy, but not necessarily popular as somebody you want to have to be president. But maybe his numbers are up because, hey, I don't want Donald Trump. If I were going to make any prediction right now at 8:32 on Tuesday night, it's that Joe Biden will win the popular vote. I'm not saying he's going to become president, but he'll win the popular vote. I can't see any scenario where that's not the case. I can't find anybody else that would say anything any other way other than maybe Donald Trump and the Republican team, at least publicly, to be real blunt. But I see some Senate races. Arizona could go Democratic. That's a flip. Iowa could flip. North Carolina could flip. Montana could flip. South Carolina could flip. Maine could flip. The Georgia seats could flip. Michigan would stay Democratic. Texas would flip. I think that's going to be a bit of a stretch. Minnesota will probably stay Democratic. So the big ones that would probably be the surprises if they did flip would be a Montana, a South Carolina, and probably a Texas.
So you said what got weird in Michigan, Texas, and was it Montana that you said? Or Minnesota, sorry.
Yeah.
Michigan, Texas, and Minnesota.
Yeah.
What got weird out there?
I'd say 2 things about Michigan and Minnesota. Those races, even a month ago, looked like 10-point leads by the incumbents. And then all of a sudden, Gary Peters and Tina Smith had these 10-point leads, and all of a sudden they evaporated into like 1 and 2 point leads. So they've gotten weird. Something is going on there. And again, we won't find out probably until we get the exit polling, which we can talk about in a little bit. Texas, also, John Cornyn had this huge lead, and then all of a sudden it shrunk and shrunk and shrunk, and nobody knows why. Now, nobody knows probably because, people like me don't know because the internal polling isn't being shared publicly. And we're probably focusing more so on the public world, the CNNs, MSNBC, the Fox networks, et cetera. They're going to focus on the presidential race. They're not going to get into the weeds. They see these Senate races to a certain degree as weeds, at least until after the election. So these huge leads, all 3 incumbents, and all of a sudden they shrunk super, super fast to the point where I see some of these states that maybe 3 months ago didn't look like flips to be flips, and these other 2 that didn't look like they'd get flipped, maybe they flipped too.
Well, and I think I saw one of the polls, or I guess a number of the polls, are basically saying a 75% chance that we are going to get the Senate to flip to Democrat.
Yeah, it's gotten to the point where it's going to be really, really tough. A couple of things. Number one, for the Republicans to spend that kind of money to keep the Senate. I mean, that's expensive. And again, if you look at what could possibly happen, remember a 50-50 split, if Joe Biden becomes president, goes to the Democrats. If it's 50-50 split and Donald Trump hangs on to the presidency, obviously it goes to the Republicans. I just think there's so much ground to cover for the Republicans and where they're spending money. So I see as Arizona is really kind of pushing out Donald Trump out of the Senate race, kind of pushing him out of Arizona. I think Arizona will go blue tonight. Just as an example, I think Iowa, Joni Ernst has a really tough play. She's got a really tough road ahead of her tonight because she's trying to balance a lot of interests. I think she's done a pretty good job trying to do it. But she's trying to support her president, and the president, of course, is engaged in some trade wars, which have really hurt Iowa farmers in getting their crops to world markets. And it'll be interesting to see if the farmers are willing to forgive him.
So let's kind of do some strategy here. We'll start with President Trump. What needs to happen? I mean, is there one state that he needs? To kind of get him going? I mean, what are the key things that have to happen for him? Are you going to say like Florida? He needs Florida. Is that going to be?
I'm not going to say that. I think that's a great question, Mike. You know, you see a lot of the pundits say, well, he's got to have this to win. Trump doesn't need Florida to hold on to the presidency. Now, if he loses Florida, he can't really afford to lose anything else, but he doesn't have to have it. I think he's got a good shot in Florida. I would not want to call Florida. I think it's just way, way too close. But let's look at Pennsylvania. If he doesn't win Pennsylvania, it's going to tell you a lot about some of the other things in the Great Lakes states. All right. Pennsylvania looks like Ohio. It looks a lot like Michigan. It looks a lot like Wisconsin. So if you want to see how your message is resonating, Florida doesn't look like any of those states, right? If you want to see how your message is resonating, Pennsylvania will be the first look. So again, in Ohio, Biden's up, but 44% in. In Pennsylvania, Biden's up, but only 7% in. It's super early. Michigan, same thing, really not enough to make a difference. But you're going to see where that message goes. So I read an article years ago, and I can't remember who said it, so I'm not going to take credit for these words. But Pennsylvania is a very dynamic state, and this author said there are three voting parts to Pennsylvania: Greater Philadelphia, Greater Pittsburgh, and Alabama. Right. So the idea,
right.
I can't remember who said it, but it was really brilliant. But Pennsylvania is the first state to really, really hone in on.
So Pennsylvania for you is the key for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Now, would you say consequently, obviously, Pennsylvania is the key for Joe Biden, or is there something else you're looking at for Biden, or does it just all get down to that state? Basically.
Well, it's a key in the sense that if Biden can take Pennsylvania, he's got, I think, an even better shot at what we were calling 4 years ago the inside straight. That means taking Michigan, taking Wisconsin. I think probably a pretty good shot at Ohio as well. The question's going to become in Pennsylvania, which again looks a lot like Ohio, a lot like Michigan demographically. Same thing with Wisconsin. But the other thing that this will tell you is whether the Democrats have done what they needed to do, and that was to get voter turnout. The Democrats failed miserably in 2016 in motivating voters in the Great Lakes states. They did a horrible job. They didn't do their homework. They got lazy. They kept thinking about this blue wall where, those of us that really study, there is no blue wall. It doesn't exist. All right. People just think that all of a sudden 2000 was going to be the map forever. Well, Donald Trump changed that map. And it wasn't the map Bill Clinton had in 92 and 96. I would say the 92 and 96 maps look much more like the 2016 map.
And talking about those areas, how much and you mentioned a little bit about Iowa affecting President Trump with the trade. How has President Trump brought jobs back as he promised?
Well, he's brought no jobs back. Right. But he's been able to hang on to some in some places. That's true. Right. So again, Mike, you're asking a good question. If it's, well, do I balance the interests of farmers versus those that maybe work in a factory. That's not easy to do. And I think that's why, getting back to Joni Ernst, she's got a really tough spot. I think she's done about as good a job as you can do. So credit to her and her campaign for balancing those interests. But Donald Trump has had some wins. He's had some successes. But again, one of the things that economics is such a powerful force that it's really hard to rework some of this stuff. The other thing I would want to mention about Iowa is that, although largely rural, agrarian, it is absolutely a swing state. And one of the things I like to remind people is that even Michael Dukakis won Iowa. So in that disaster of a campaign in 1988, even Michael Dukakis won Iowa.
Now, earlier you were talking that you wanted to discuss a little bit about the exit polls. What are you seeing there? Is there anything that you want to talk about regarding all these exit polls?
Yeah, the one thing I tell our listeners, number one, I have a love affair with exit polls. All right, it is truly the best data we have. All right, so if you've ever been polled on your way out of your voting location, all right, it's all fresh in your mind, right? And we know exactly who you voted for. People are brutally honest, by the way. I think there's this belief that, well, I'll just fake it. No, people are brutally honest, and that's what I love about Americans. But all the demographic information, how people voted, and that's why the exit polls tend to be incredibly reliable, as they were in 2016. Not the pre-polls, although the pre-polls, again, folks, were really, they got it, except for Wisconsin, where they were way off. Everything else was in the margin of error. So exit polls tell us a lot, and we hang on to this information as long as we can. We use it for the next four years, right? Then the next presidential campaign, because it will tell us where we need to spend money. Think of all the demographic information we have. Pre-election polling is getting very difficult, right? Because nobody will pick up the landline phone. Why? Because nobody's got one, right? And now you'll get spam calls, and now you know it's spam because Apple will tell you, or Samsung will tell you, it's a spam call. Don't pick it up, right? That science is getting harder and harder and harder. Our exit polling is the best information we have right now. Whereas people before an election are more likely to tell you whether they're going to buy Tide or not because they live on West 33rd Street in North Canton, but they're not going to tell you who they're going to vote for. They're just going to hang up on you.
Yep. Bob, you flashed on and now you're gone. I thought maybe he had a question, but he jumped on and he moved away. West 33rd. I like that. 33rd Street. So that's a place to be. Bob, do you have a question?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go.
Oh, good. Well, if you can hear me, that's really all that counts. Jarrod, talk about a little bit something that has been growing really since Trump won in 2016 is, as social media has become a more powerful tool for candidates.
We lost him. I can't hear him. Can you, Jarrod?
I can't, but I can make some comments about social media.
Social media, sure. Yeah. I think we said social media before he left.
One of the things that, again, two things about social media that I think everybody would agree to. Number one, we don't like when politicians use it. Number two, it works. So it's much like negative advertising when it comes to politics, right? Everybody hates it, but I'll tell you what, it works, and it works well. Again, this is social media, right? We're doing this through something we wouldn't have done even 10 years ago, Mike. I mean, and it's great, and people are more likely to do this than turn on the television or do anything else. Again, it's effective. People will watch it, they'll listen to it. But the other thing to keep in mind is it tends to reinforce what you already believe. Right. So when Donald Trump is tweeting, it's reinforcing what his followers already believe. He's not going to get new people. All right. And when Democrats do it, frankly, the research is pretty clear. You're not going to build a bigger tent because you're tweeting. But maybe that's okay. Maybe it's good enough to keep your base active, motivated, angry enough, scared enough, happy enough, whatever, to get out to the polls. And again, it's nobody likes it, but it's incredibly effective.
I think we're going to
I'm sorry. What the part that got cut off was it has been social media has been very important for the candidates, and like you said, like they shouldn't use it, but they do, and it works. But something that just the quote unquote fake news idea that has been really put forth, discrediting the media, and really the confusion about what's real information and what's not. How do you see that playing out when people go to the polls tonight, and what kind of effect? Because I think most people can identify the BS when they see it, but there is that, and you can see it in your social media feeds. You can see it in some spots where there are people that can't identify the difference between what's facts, what's news, what's propaganda, what's rhetoric, and it's all just truth. So, what kind of effect do you see this having? What percentage do you see of this affecting the polls?
Oh, I don't know if it's going to, that's a really good question. I think number one, you're right. I think most people can critically think enough to the point where they know what's fake and what's not. I think if there are claims of fake news, or there even is fake news. Okay. Now, by the way, I don't think there's a whole lot of it. In fact, I think that it's a very, very small amount. Even in the news outlets that tend to be, far left or far right. But I think it reinforces what people generally already believe. It can be motivating. And I think the claim that something is false news is stronger than any kind of false news, fake news that might be out there.
Right. And I think too, when even the far right and the far left, you're getting the truth, but it's selective truth. If you're watching one area, you're getting the stuff that feels comfortable to you. If you're getting the other area, you're getting the stuff that feels comfortable to those people. And where you're not intaking the whole story. And I don't know where we got to, as a society where, we feel like the people that we root for are perfect and the people that we root against are terrible. And it's really not true. It's all in the middle. Nobody has ever been elected who was perfect. And, nobody has ever been elected that was, and somebody who was completely evil. Where has common sense kind of gone, and where do you see that effect happening? And do you think, depending on how this night goes, do you think that could kind of change or start to kind of come back to, come back to the middle a little bit?
Man, that last one, I don't see us coming back to the middle for a while.
Yeah.
Right. So when it comes to the question about common sense, I don't know. I'd like to think that society has done a good job in educating its public and becoming crap detectors, as my mom, a retired school teacher, used to say. I'm not sure people want to detect crap sometimes. Sometimes it's something that's just you hang on to, it motivates you, it scares you, it angers you, it excites you, whatever it is, to get you out to the polls and vote. So, that's what politics is all about. A lot of times you're not telling people the whole story. And very rarely, Bob, to get your point, do you find a politician said, you know what, wait a minute, what I said back then is not really the whole story. Here's really all the whole story, and it's going to make me look kind of bad. The only way, and I'm not sure this is necessarily a good thing. I think there are some moral hazards with this, but, we Americans, frankly, and again, we're all of that age whereby, we got used to having these blowout elections where by the end of Tuesday night, we know who won, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe we don't get back to that middle until there's a clear winner and a clear loser, right? And if you think about it, even when even on our recent past, when you look at races that were close, right? Now, 2000 woke up everybody and said, wait a minute, now this is crazy. How the hell did this happen? I want to go to bed and know who the hell the president is. Although some of us went to bed and woke up and said, no, that isn't it. But you think
it was about a week it was over a week in 2000, right? We heard the term that we never heard before, the dangling Chad, or
the hanging Chad. So
right.
Everybody remembers pictures of Charles Burton, who was the county poll czar. I can't remember what it was, but you'd know him if you saw him. But yeah, even when we had these small these razor thin elections, say in 1976, we still knew when we went to bed who was going to be president, who wasn't. Jimmy Carter, who barely beat Gerald Ford, won all these states in the eastern part of the United States, time being what it is. We went to bed knowing that Gerald Ford had lost. Same thing with Richard Nixon in 1968. Razor thin win, big win in the Electoral College, pretty obvious. 1960, the same thing. Everything else had been a blowout. I think until we get to clear winners and clear losers, I think we're going to be divided for quite some time.
Yeah, where the biggest war in the world is between Americans right now. And I think you really want to come back to a point where we can at least, I was telling Mike earlier on the phone, like just watching families get torn apart over politics. When you grow up, what don't you discuss, kids? Politics and religion. And that's all there is anymore is politics and religion. And you see just people just being torn apart because a fundamental belief is something that is really core, and it gets you super emotional and it gets you super irrational once you kind of dig yourself in, right?
Yeah, and I really wish that weren't the case. I think of my son, his mom and I are two different political parties and two different religions. And, I like to think he's getting a good liberal arts education because we handle it so well and we don't let, things get too divisive. Bob, I think that's true. And I don't know where we lost it. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if it's because we don't spend enough time with each other. I think about election night. One of the reasons I love election night, and I love politics and political science and that type of thing, is some of the best memories of my life, to be honest, is being with my parents on election night, both of them. Even though they were divorced, we would all watch TV together and watch the election returns come in. And, that's just a warm and fuzzy. And I'm not saying, it's family values and all that kind of stuff. I just, I don't know necessarily what happened, but I know we need to get there because I agree. This isn't necessarily healthy, and to be able to disagree with somebody but not call them a blankety blank, I think is an important thing. I disagree with you, but let's go have a beer. Let's go get some ice cream. Let's go do something. It's not that big a deal.
And honestly, I think that's where social media has its issue because, when you're a keyboard warrior, you're way more likely in your little cocoon, with your records behind you and your little turntable and guitar hanging. You're in your comfy little zone and you just type out whatever, you feel in a second. But, I think that and things can get real, contentious. But when you actually are with people that have a differing view than you, if you have a conversation in the same space and you kind of, have a different, I guess, transference of energy. Like if we really were to sit and think about how we deal with people in our real life that think differently than us, we kind of accept that as that's how it's supposed to be and things are okay. But, in this world of social media, I think people really feel safe and they're going to really dig their heels on the ground. And I think we've all I know I've fallen victim to that. And, it just doesn't, I think that, I hope we come back to a point that we realize that, hey, well, if we were really like having coffee with this person, is this where it would go? Probably not. I think we'd be a whole lot more respectful.
Well, let me ask you guys a question then. Do you think COVID's making it better or worse?
Oh, I think it's worse. I really think it's worse because you have this separation because now that's all it is. How we're talking today is how most families are talking or how most friends are getting together. And I think that, being isolated really puts you in a position where you don't have that energy transference with being with another living person. And I think you can detach yourself so that way, whatever empathy you might have is actually kind of pushed down and doesn't become a factor in how you converse. Yeah. And I think that's that when you put people in a room together, I think here's what I think is that when people are like this, they never feel that uncomfortable part that you're in a room with somebody who's getting agitated or feels different, and to try and get out of that uncomfortable spot and try and find common ground. you don't do that when you're separated. You don't feel that uncomfortableness of wanting to find common ground. You just keep going until you can prove that you're right, regardless of whether the facts support that or not.
Yeah.
Sounds like every conversation Bob and I have, Jarrod.
True. It's very true. We haven't hung out face to face in so many years. That's why I hate him.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'd love him if we went out to coffee.
You wouldn't get me out to coffee, but I don't leave the house. COVID's been good for me. I'm an introvert, and it's worked out well for me. You
say you're an introvert, but I don't believe it.
Yeah, I know you don't, because I
don't believe it at all.
I put on a good show.
Who has a radio show and calls themselves an introvert?
Me.
Him.
Me.
Exactly. That's fake news.
So it's
so
a couple of things that I'm watching here as you guys are talking about social media. I am on media while we are talking. There are reports in Mitch McConnell has already won re-election in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm. And that's not real shocking, right, Jarrod? That's something we kind of expected.
He had a challenger, Amy McGrath, who was able to make some inroads and make it probably a little uncomfortable for him. Mm-hmm. But again, what's great about being majority leaders, you get a lot more money, and if you want to spend money on yourself, you can spend money on yourself.
And really, that probably what we saw in Kentucky probably is going to make a bigger difference the next time that seat is up for re-election, right? Is it then how it really affects today? Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I would see Amy McGrath probably running against Rand Paul the next time again, and then I see this probably being the last one for McConnell.
And I think too, as far as McConnell goes, I think that he's been. I think he's been a good. I don't think he did anything in his time as Senate Majority Leader to risk that seat.
No, not at all. In fact, I think whether you agree with him or disagree with him, I think ably he did the right things to keep himself in control, and he may have done enough. He may have done enough in spite of Donald Trump to keep the Senate. Now, again, it's going to be I think it's going to be a longer night with these Senate races than it is the presidential race. So, again, the one thing I would want to, and I know I've said it before, but let me say it again. Hats off to those who are running the elections. I mean, right now, just from looking, they're getting this job done. I mean, Florida's got 92% of the vote in. They're getting the job done. I tell you what, hats off to those workers, because I know they were getting beat up by both sides and all the pre-election litigation they've done. But again, these Senate races, actually finding out who took control of the Senate will probably keep us up a little bit.
And I have to say too, sorry, Mike, you take a breath in to speak, and then I just kind of pounce on you. But I think just speaking, you just hope that what you experience locally is being repeated in communities across the country, because I'm in Medina County, and I think the Medina County Board of Elections has done a great job. We did absentee as we do all the time, which I really prefer, because when I get that ballot, I remember the first time I voted, I understood 2 or 3 things I saw in there, and the rest of it was just a wild guess. And now, I like having the time to go, oh, I didn't know about this issue. Let me go look this up. I think I think I'm a more effective American that way. But that being said, they really, when you make a mistake, even when you request it, they contact you and say you made a mistake, and that at least in Medina County, I think they really did a good job of preserving the sanctity of an election night. And so I think, by the time we dropped it off, I think everything is gone real smooth. And you really hope that, as is kind of true with what we get with the media today, what generates ad revenue is tension. So, all this stuff that we're hearing about mail-in balloting and voting and all that, I think was probably a little overblown, because what we've actually experienced has been pretty good.
I totally agree. I think so far so good. I mean, we'll see. It's early. We'll see what happens later on tonight in other states. But hats off to Ohio. I mean, we've done a great job. And again, just the early states, we're getting the stuff back. Who knows? But hats off to the people that do this for a living. Good for them.
A couple things that I'm seeing here, Jarrod.
And Jarrod, I was thinking. No, just kidding, Mike. Go
well, you had me going too, to be honest.
Well, if you've noticed, Jarrod, Bob's all about feelings. I like the data and the strategy, which is good.
I'm fascinated by all the data and strategy, but
I can tell
you got to get the psychology in there too.
Yeah, I think you need some psychology, Bob.
I pay handsomely for one thing.
Jarrod, you might find this interesting. As you guys were talking, I was just kind of scrolling around. You mentioned Texas earlier. Williamson County outside of Austin. President Trump had won that county by nearly 10 percentage points, and they're reporting that Joe Biden is ahead in Williamson County. Well, it's just outside of Austin in Texas. I kind of found that I find that interesting. The other thing that I'm seeing is Fulton County in Atlanta. Clinton had 68% of the vote. Biden is 10 points better. I guess it doesn't really matter. I guess if you how big of a margin you win by. But these all
you got to do is win by one.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't matter whether you win by 30 points or 1 point. It's just those are some of the things that I'm seeing coming in.
I think the one thing that and again, hopefully we'll get to do this again in 4 years. But what I can tell you is that I think at some point Georgia and Texas will become once again reliably Democratic, and I think that's going to happen before Florida does. The trends are clearly going that way. It's a generational thing. In Texas, it also deals with first generation immigrant families. But remember, Texas and Georgia, the whole Deep South was reliably Democratic up until 1968. And of course, Jimmy Carter did very, very well in the South as a Southerner. Bill Clinton won Georgia 1 year in 92. But those two states will become reliably, I'm not sure they're going to flip tonight. But in 2024, I'm virtually certain they'll flip and they'll become blue. Florida, I think, is just going to be that weird purple thing that we're going to be wrestling with for a long time.
I agree with you. And it's another interesting thing. We were talking about the exit polls and polling. I'm sure you've heard of this company that's gotten a little bit of gotten some run. Trafalgar Group. Have you heard of them? Yeah. They basically say that people lie in the polling. So what do you make of what do you make of the silent majority that President Trump talks about? Is there a silent majority out there? Okay.
No, I don't think it's there. I think, again, I think it's a nice thing to say. And again, getting back to Bob's point, I mean, politics is politics. I'm trying to convince you of something. And remember, when you're running for office, you're not practicing good government. You're not even preaching good government. You just want the people to vote for you. Right. But I don't think it exists. And again, exit polling didn't show us that. Remember, in 2016, the biggest difference was the fact that Democrats could not get their population out. And if I were to break it down, I can give you basically 5 counties. All right, Milwaukee County in Wisconsin, Wayne County in Michigan, and 3 counties that essentially I'm going to call Greater Philadelphia. All right, where the Democrats did a terrible job in trying to get out the vote. I don't think that silent majority is there. And if anything else, I would have said this: it would have been stronger for George W. Bush in 2004, and than it would have been in 2016.
And the Democrats have done a much better job this time around of getting people out to vote.
I think they've done a good job admitting that they had made a mistake. Now, again, early voting is one thing. We still have to see how it turns out in the end, but I'll be looking at those particular areas. Basically Greater Philadelphia, Wayne County, Michigan, and Milwaukee County, Wisconsin. Again, you just have a little bit of a bump up in each one of those places. And Hillary Clinton in 2016, Hillary Clinton would have been the first female president.
So I'm looking at something right now in Ohio. It's looking like they're saying 54% of the votes reported looks like 45.7 is for President Trump, and 53.1 is leaning towards Biden. What percent, Jarrod, is it 100%, or is there a certain percent that you look at that, with 60%, 70%? At what point do you look at it and say, I think we kind of know?
Oh, I think it depends on the state. In Ohio, I'm going to wait for a long time. Yeah, okay. Same thing with Florida. Same thing with all these 10 states that we're looking at. Now, again, if it's going to be Alabama, I'll look at one ballot box and call it, right? If it's going to be Mississippi, if it's going to be Arkansas, Missouri is a state that was a swing state for many, many presidential elections and now is very reliably red. That's one of those states that actually got redder. Kansas, Oklahoma. Nowadays, of course, Kentucky and Tennessee. One of the things to keep in mind, of course, is that Bill Clinton won Kentucky and Tennessee twice. Now, some of that had to do with his appeal. He had a vice presidential candidate that was from Tennessee. But remember, in the year 2000, Al Gore couldn't even win his own state. Didn't win Tennessee. So, it really kind of depends on the state. I think Tennessee is reliably red. Kentucky is. West Virginia is reliably red now. Even Michael Dukakis won West Virginia, but now we don't consider that a blue state at all. I think it depends on the state.
So I'm looking at North Carolina, 75% of the votes are in. Has President Trump with 47.7% and Joe Biden with 51.1%.
Yeah, too early.
Too early. Even now, Florida at 92%. Probably still too early, right? You've got 51% leaning towards Donald Trump, right, and 48% for Biden.
It's still too early. Still to this day, there is a reality that we can't ignore. The urban counties get their votes in quicker. Right. Now, again, that gap in time has gotten a little bit narrower, and so for us, it's gotten a lot better in the sense that we can shorten that time whereby all the votes are in, right? But it's just historically taken rural counties to get their votes in. So I would want to know where those votes are coming. So right. Ohio, a state that I know better, I'm looking at CNN's website, 53% in. Biden's got a lead. I would want to know where those votes are coming. My best guess is even with 53%, it's probably Columbus and suburban Columbus, Cleveland and suburban Cleveland, Akron, Toledo, Cincinnati. Those are the areas where, I would expect those votes counts to be high. When we start getting them from Southeast Ohio, Northwest Ohio, East Central Ohio, that's when these things are going to get closer. So even in Ohio, and it's good that Ohio's getting these votes in, 53%, not bad. It's only 9:00 at night. I think that's a great thing. Again, hats off to the people that do that stuff for a living and took a lot of beating over the last couple of months about not being able to chew gum and walk at the same time.
Right. Versus 15% in Pennsylvania, that are in and counted.
Yeah, let's hope they do a little bit better than that. Now, the thing is, in Pennsylvania, they have a state law. Now, remember, some of this deals with state law. They weren't going to start counting anything from outside until, late at night. It's going to take a lot longer to count things. And this is one of the problems that and I'm not saying problems, let me say challenges, rather, about federalism. We have 50 states. You want to have states that have their own powers? You have 50 different sets of state law.
Yep. Will that ever change?
No, no? I don't. I think for all sorts of reasons, and most of them, frankly, are good. The federal law, again, federal election law that we have really regulates two things. Number one, how much you can contribute to federal elections. And number two, federal law says you just can't discriminate. Okay. And if you look at the Constitution, it says some very basic things, right? Both genders can vote. Those over the age of 18 can vote. All right. And you can't discriminate based on how you allocate the vote.
Right.
But other than that, you can do whatever. Sometimes felons can vote in some states and sometimes they can't. Sometimes it depends on what felony they've committed. Sometimes they lose their rights forever. Sometimes they get their rights back. Polls are open at different times. Early voting stretches in different times. mail voting is treated differently than in-person early voting in different states. It's just very, very complex, but I don't think anybody's ready to go amend the Constitution again.
Should we change our voting day? Why is it not on the weekend or a holiday?
Well, once again, we revere our Constitution, right? So the first Tuesday after the first Monday is where we've pretty much stuck with it. It's not to say that we haven't made some changes. Again, a lot of people think, well, we need to have the outcome right away. Well, remember, when we created this country, we said, well, when we get it done, we get it done. Then it was, well, we got to get all this done by March 4th. Then we backed it up and said, okay, now we got to get it done by January 20th, right? So the Electoral College, you got to wrap up your thing and get it done. So I don't see any major
is the Electoral College in jeopardy?
You know what? That's a great question, Mike. I think it would take maybe one opportunity for the Republicans to win the popular vote and lose in the Electoral College, and I think you'd have a shot. One of the things to keep in mind is in the late 1960s was the last real effort we had to actually change the Electoral College and amend the Constitution to do it. And it actually fell apart in the Senate. The House was all for it. Again, amending our Constitution is a complete headache. I won't get into how we do it. But it fell apart. And a lot of it had to do with the 1968 election where people were scratching their head like, my God, George Wallace might become president. Let's say this thing went into the House of Representatives, right? Now, with that said, maybe it would take an election that went to the House of Representatives. Now, I will say this for those that are following the map tonight and listening to us. If Trump is able to hang on to Pennsylvania and Florida, there's a real shot at a tie. A tie goes to the House of Representatives, right? They all vote as a state, right? So each state gets one vote. Now, think about that. That's highly undemocratic, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if you think about this little one state gets as many votes as the state of Ohio, it doesn't. Ohio gets to only cast one vote. The vote would go Republican because we have 16 members of the U.S. House. 12 Republicans, 4 Democrats. Obviously, it's going to be 12-4. Ohio's vote would go for Trump. And in fact, there'd be 26 states. So if Trump could actually get it to a tie, he'll become president. He'll get to keep his job. But with that said, I don't think the Electoral College is in trouble until we see maybe the Republicans lose. And that's not commentary whether I think it's a good idea or not. But the Republicans lose the presidency even though they won the popular vote.
And right now, looking at the results that are in far too early, Trump has the popular vote where Biden has the Electoral College right now. But a question for you: why do you say that if the Republicans have that scenario play out, which is exactly the scenario that played out for the Democrats in 2016? Why would it change? Why is it more likely to change under a Republican scenario rather than a Democrat scenario, or is it just timing as of who controls the House and the Senate at the time?
Well, it would be both. I guess those are two really good questions. I think I'm not saying it would happen. I think your best shot at it would be to see if the other party had it happen to them, so to speak, right? So Nan, it kind of happened to you too. So maybe we'll fix it. When it goes back to when we go back to the 1960s and the real last shot at it, really the only legitimate shot at throwing out the Electoral College was because the threat of George Wallace moving that election into the House of Representatives and the real fear that the deal making could, again, by the way, the only playbook we have for this is the election of 1824. It's the only one we've got where John Quincy Adams not only lost the Electoral College, didn't get wasn't a majority loss, lost the popular vote. Andrew Jackson won both of those, threw it into the House, and there all this deal making took place, which is really, really undemocratic. We're not comfortable with that. We didn't change it then. But if you remember, George Wallace was a staunch segregationist, and I don't think you're going to find anybody that thinks that guy should have ever become president. But the fear was that, my gosh, he could have actually, and he did win several states in the South, that he could have won enough states, right, and enough electoral votes that nobody gets a majority, and it goes into the House of Representatives, and by constitutional rule, right, you take the top 3. So again, it's kind of interesting. Now, again, you have to have gotten at least one electoral vote. So if we wound up with a 269 tie, it will go to the House, and President Trump will keep his job. But I'm think that's the best shot we would have at it. But I'm not saying that would necessarily be enough. I think if the Democrats kept winning the popular vote and losing the election, I don't know if the Republicans are going to jump on board anytime soon. And it really would truly take both political parties to be on board to get it to change.
And I just totally drew a blank. How about that, Mike? I just totally drew a blank. I know.
I'm gonna ask a question that Deirdre's got in here while you're trying to unblank yourself.
Right. Oh no! Now I remember. I remember I was going to ask. It's relatively simple. I run into plenty of adults that don't understand the popular vote and how that affects the Electoral College and why we have the Electoral College. So if you want to give us a brief history lesson on why it exists and how it works and what, at the time that it was created, what its aim was and why it was best for our democracy.
Oh, well, okay. I can't argue that it was best for our democracy other than to say this. The Electoral College was one of the chief compromises to creating the Constitution. So, and there were lots of compromises, creating the federal courts and state courts, the 3/5 compromise, which is really kind of truly an embarrassment, historical embarrassment. It was one of the chief compromises to getting everybody on board, because you had big states that wanted this, small states that wanted this. Big states that said, hey, you're going to treat us based on head count. And small states said, no, wait a minute, we're all states. You got to treat us all the same, right? So in a nutshell, what kind of happened is they said, okay, we'll create the Electoral College. Plus, we don't trust common people to vote for anybody, right? So we're just going to keep it among the electors. And, the electors were those that had wealth, had education, most of the time both, frankly, were men, were white men, old white men. Of course, old would have been even 10 years younger than we are now. But nonetheless, it was a compromise to get the thing done. Now, let's say they didn't make that compromise. It would have probably taken decades before we would have scrapped the Articles of Confederation, which was our first national governing document, and move us into the Constitution. So again, that's what it was. Now, when it comes to the popular vote, right, that's just one measure. But interestingly enough, it's not a legal measure at all, right? The Constitution basically says you become president if one of two things happens. One, you get a majority of the electoral votes, which is nowadays 270, right? Or if it goes into the House, you win a majority of states that all vote one at a time, right? Their delegations all get together. So you think about Wyoming. Well, you have one member of the House. That person gets to cast the vote. Highly undemocratic. Now, that's not to say we haven't changed things in our Constitution to make it more democratic. Think about, right, all the amendments that we've made, right? Prohibiting discrimination based on previous servitude, gender, age, poll taxes, a lot of things we've done. But also the thing that we did is we used to let states just say, hey, come up with a system to pick senators, all right? Well, we changed that, right? So a little over 100 years ago, we said, you know what? Senators are going to be elected by popular vote, just like we do today, all right? So it's not to say that we couldn't change things. I just don't know if their stomach is there for that. And again, Bob, getting back to your point about this divisiveness and how we get out of it, I think a constitutional debate right now would be really, really toxic. I'm not saying it wouldn't be a good thing. I'm just saying I think it would be really toxic right now. I think you're going to have to wait a few years.
I think you're right. But thank you for that. That was very enlightening.
Yeah.
And so we had a comment from Deirdre, right?
Yes.
Well, what are your thoughts about so we basically asked the same question.
Yeah. So if you're asking,
I don't know if we got Jarrod's personal thoughts. I think he gave some reporting on it, but I don't know I think she's looking for his personal thoughts. Sorry, Jarrod.
My personal thoughts.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Well, I think the way it is right now, including the provision about it going into the House of Representatives, I think it's very anti-democratic. A democracy by definition, we all vote, and we have a majority vote. We decide who the winner is. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that we need to do that strictly. All right. I think there are lots of alternatives, and we can be as inductive as we want to be deductive. Other countries, as well as states here, do runoff systems, right? Top two, we go do it again. I wouldn't have a problem with that. All right. But you do have a Democratic deficit when you have the popular vote saying this and the Electoral College saying, well, we're going to choose somebody else, right? Now, what makes this much more difficult, by the way, is that most states have laws that prohibit electors from going to the Electoral College, right, and voting for somebody else. So one of the things to keep in mind is that when you go and vote for President Trump or Joe Biden or Joe Jorgensen or whoever you're going to vote for, all right, you're actually not voting for that person. You're voting for electors that are pledged to that candidate. So imagine when you go to the ballot box, right, and you check off the ballot, imagine there being 18 people in Ohio, 18 people behind that ballot that are saying, hey, if this candidate gets the most votes in the state of Ohio, the 18 of us will show up in the Electoral College and go vote. Most states have bans on faithless electors, which would say, oh my gosh, the popular vote went to Clinton, but I'm pledged to Trump. I got to do what the popular vote says. Most states don't let you do that. Again, state law, right? 50 states to 50 different rules that you can do that. I think the Electoral College can be saved through other models. I like a runoff system. I think that would work. You could certainly make it more democratic in the sense that maybe you change the number, so maybe not just 2 senators and the number of House members that you have. So Ohio, we have 18 because we have 16 members of the U.S. House delegation and 2 senators. We get 18. Maybe you make it purely based on head count. Maybe the big states, well over 200 years ago had the better argument. But it can lead to some real. Now think about how badly you could possibly lose an election in terms of the popular vote and still become president. And what I really don't like, now again, it's only happened once, so I don't want to sound like an alarmist, although again, we have made changes to our Constitution to make it more democratic, again, including people who can vote, the Senate, et cetera. I think it would more or less make much more sense if you fix the problem whereby the Electoral College can match the popular vote. So however it is you decide to do that. And there's some other models. I like runoffs. I think that's a good idea. Take the top 2. Many democratic countries around the world do that as well. Georgia's going to do it with 2 Senate seats tonight.
And so Mike, I don't know how long you planned on going tonight, but as we're almost an hour and a half into our election night coverage, which is pretty awesome. I'll say, Jarrod, before, whatever we do to wrap up, let's kind of take a look at both paths in the presidential election. In your estimation, what is it going to take for Donald Trump to retain his job?
270 votes. Thanks.
Well, 270 votes. Sure. The Electoral College needs.
What needs to happen between now and when we wake up in the morning, or when this eventually gets called? Because I think we are going to be just the posturing with the litigation that we've seen before the election. I think that we're looking at more of a 2000 scenario where they're going to drag this out as long as they can in the courts before declaring it. So I guess keeping all that in mind, what is the path? And this is almost like NFL draft prognostication and factoring in trades, right? like, all right, who's going to trade with who to draft this person? What's the path for Donald Trump to retain the presidency?
I think he's got to hang on to both Pennsylvania and Florida. All right. So I think Arizona's off the table. I think it's going to be really hard for him to keep that state. I think the demographics are absolutely going that way. I don't think he's going to flip. I don't think Georgia or Texas are going to flip tonight, but I think they're going to be really, really close. But he's got to have Florida and Pennsylvania because I think he's going to lose. Now, again, this is my own analysis. Mechanically, it doesn't have to work out this way, but I think he's going to lose Arizona. So he's got to hang on to those 2 states. Pennsylvania is going to tell us a lot about how folks in the Great Lakes, that's us, feel about his politics, frankly. He's also going to have to show that his base turned out, and the Democrats also once again failed to get people to go vote in the numbers that they needed. All right. So again, going back to 2016 and going back to our discussion on polling, it's one thing for somebody to pick up a phone and saying, yeah, this is how I'm going to vote. It's another thing to show up and vote. All right. Hillary Clinton clearly was not as popular a candidate in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Iowa, for that matter, as the Democrats would have liked for her to be in, or made her, which is in two entirely different things. It may, at some point, just to take one more bite at the apple, it may be at some point, and I don't think you're going to see it drawn out tonight, but maybe moving in the future, the candidates are going to say either I'm going to take the Great Lakes or I'm going to take Florida. So either I'm doing it up here, I'm doing it up here, but it's going to be really hard to do both. Now, Obama was able to do it twice. Bill Clinton was able to do it once. All right. Couldn't do it in 92. But I think you're going to say either I'm going to go with this group and it's going to be populism, or it's going to be this group and it's going to be a very different message. I think at some point you're going to see that. But again, when we see Pennsylvania and we see Florida, if they go, how are we doing now? So Biden's got a sizable lead, but God, it's so early in Pennsylvania and Florida.
Look at Texas, Jarrod. It's dead heat with 62% of the vote in.
Wow. I still don't think it'll flip it. Man, that's good news for Joe Biden. Yeah.
And
very good news, obviously.
So before we get to Joe Biden and what one state you think that he needs to win in order to claim the presidency, you brought up Florida, or the scenario of you pick the Great Lakes or Florida. But if I recall, in 2016, in the days leading up to the end of the campaigns, Hillary Clinton basically pulled all the money out of Florida and saying, "Hey, we're done messing with Florida," and it ended up really deciding the election.
Yeah, you're exactly right. One of the things, and this is why exit polling is so good, because that's how we found that out. And she wasn't the first candidate to make that mistake. Where saying, you know what, I've got only so many resources, and I'm going to pull them out of one state, take them to another, and miss on that. All right. Al Gore did it in 2000. He pulled money out of Ohio, and by exit polling, it's clear he shouldn't have done that. He might have been able to do it. Again, Hillary Clinton probably had the resources to stay pretty much in all the states and still make a strong argument. Florida is just one of those tricky places. I think that's going to be a purple state for a long, long time. You've got 1,000 people a day moving into Florida. All right. And they take their politics with them. It's not homegrown politics, right? Texas, I would say, is a little bit more of a homegrown. All right. Georgia, I'd say, is a little bit more of a homegrown. But people in Florida, they take their
wherever they come from, right?
Right. Wherever they come from. And that's going to make that, it's not going to make it redder, bluer. It's going to make it more purpler. I don't even know whatever that word would be. But nonetheless, I think it's really, really going to be tough. But again, getting to Biden, Biden needs the inside straight. He needs the Pennsylvania, the Michigan, the Wisconsin. I think he's going to get Arizona. That's the one state that I think is going to flip. And frankly, moving forward, it will probably stay blue. It's certainly trending that way, even with the last several GOP contenders winning it. I think that one's going to go blue.
Couple quick questions, Bob. We'll wrap up here if that's okay. Dave Patterson asked, online voting, is that going to be a possibility?
I think it'll happen. It may not happen right away. We're a funny people. We're going to do it if we feel comfortable doing it. Mm-hmm. But when we Americans feel comfortable doing it, and we've got a security system that will allow for it, David, I think it's a great question. I think it's going to happen. It may not happen in 2024, maybe not 2028, but eventually it will happen. People will complain about the lines too long. One of the things to keep in mind is that one of the reasons why we are more likely to send an email to our senator or a member of the House is that we can do it on our own time. I've got to vote on the government's time, right? And even with early voting, that's made it a little bit better. But I've still got to vote on their time, right? Whereas with online voting, I can take a lunch break and go do it. Okay,
and it's instant. I think it'll happen. It's basically instant. I mean, why should I be comfortable registering to vote online, right? Because that's security and verifying your identity. And so, what's the difference between that and voting online? And the voting would be instant,
right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to, before that happens, and Jarrod, tell me if you agree. I think before that kind of thing happens, you really need to build faith into the system of being online, because I think that the idea of the United States Postal Service is pretty safe, but that was completely destroyed over the past year, and something where we know that, I mean, because we see it with our credit card information, we see it with companies that have data breaches and all that stuff, that you're going to have a really hard time building the faith of the people into a system that involves computers, even though, now, like my computer now, it has a fingerprint scanner. It has a facial recognition. Where you can start to build some of that security in. But I think it's going to be a really long time before you're going to be, because it is really, you talk about, a true democracy. It's going to be, I think, a really, really long time before the people feel super comfortable that the information that they transmit is going to be pure to the departments of election.
I agree. I mean, but I think we'll get there. I think at some point we'll see some trust and we'll get there. And it may take a couple of blowout elections where there's no, well, my gosh, it was so close, so I'm the guy that, or the gal that lost, so I'm going to blame it on a corrupt system. Okay. So again, I think that's probably what it's going to take. Maybe a couple of blowouts. Say, okay, well, we've kind of got this thing figured out. But I think online voting eventually will happen.
Okay. How about some predictions, and then we'll close this up. Okay,
you got it.
Jarrod, you're going to be the most probably accurate and most informed. So we're going to go from the least informed person and the highly volatile person up to you. So that leaves rock, paper, scissors, Bob, on who's going to be the most volatile.
Ready?
One, two, three. Oh, wait a minute. What? Yeah, forget it.
You both go paper? All right, just do it again.
No, I did scissors. I had scissors.
Oh, did you scissors? Oh, yeah. I thought I went paper.
All right. So I'm more volatile than Bob, and probably less.
I mean, we didn't need Rochambeau to.
Okay. So I am going to say that since I have a feeling I know what you guys are going to say, I'm just going to say Trump is going to retain the presidency. How about that?
That's my gut. My gut says we end up. And not that I have a feeling that's probably how it's going to play out. That's how I felt the whole time. I didn't think that the Democrats, they had 4 years to come up with a battle plan, and I think they spent too much time battling in the present instead of battling for today, and I don't know that they gave us the right candidate.
So you're going Trump as well?
I'm going Trump as well.
Well, I was only going Trump just because I figured you two were going to go Biden. So I'm going to jump over with Jarrod and go with Biden.
I haven't said anything yet.
Yeah, well, you don't have to. I can tell the way this whole conversation has been going tonight. I mean, you've been, but and by the way, you have been, in my opinion, very unbiased. Okay,
well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I am taking
fake news, Michael.
I don't like the term fake news, by the way.
I don't either. I think it's like, when you work in the media as long as I have, and you understand how to write rhetoric, and you understand how to write for, how to use buzzwords and how to use psychology. When you see it, you can recognize it and go, okay, well, that's probably not right. But I also understand the power of it. And I mean, in the
real power, absolutely.
In the past 72 hours, the guy that I've seen advertised to me more than anybody has been Donald Trump.
No question.
I think that's right. It's a guy on the ropes, and he's spent an awful lot of money. He didn't get the October surprise that he wanted in a vaccine, but I don't know that it matters.
Yeah.
All right, so we got Bob with Trump, Mike with Biden. Jarrod, you're the tiebreaker.
Well, I don't know how much of a tiebreaker I is, but again, I believe in the science, believe in the polls. I think Biden will be the next president, but I think it'll be incredibly close. I think much closer than a lot of people think. But I think Biden will be able to do what it is he needs to do. I think he'll win Pennsylvania. I think he'll win Michigan, and I think he'll win Arizona.
And currently, looking at if you look, let me click through on my map here, is that they are with Ohio in. They have it's about a 2-point spread right now. With Joe Biden currently in the lead. So they're projecting Ohio and Pennsylvania this is the Associated Press, projecting Ohio and Pennsylvania for Biden, while Michigan and Wisconsin go to Trump.
Really? Already? That's the AP?
Yeah, that's the AP.
Wow. Yeah, but Wisconsin's only 8%.
They're only
Trump is up by,
well, that's gutsy, man.
0.5%.
What I have at the AP currently is
that's still not enough for Biden.
10% in Donald Trump, 53%, Joe Biden, 45%.
What I just find still fascinating is Texas, 73% of the votes reported, 49.4% for Donald Trump, 49.2% for Joseph Biden. I mean, it's just really close in Texas.
It's close. I still can't see that state flipping. Now, again, in 2024, when we're doing this in 4 years, I think it'll be blue. But I can't see there being enough.
The idea of a blue Texas just kind of blows my mind a little bit.
Right, and it's going to blow a lot of people's minds for sure. Except I think you're going to see that balance. I think Ohio is going to become reliably red over time. I think the same would be true of Wisconsin, but then again, I see a Texas and a Georgia that will become reliably blue, where Florida is just going to stay so freaking purple. It's going to make people crazy forever. But again, Florida keeps growing like this. Right now it's the third largest state in the union. It'll outpace Texas.
Jarrod, you have to understand that soon Florida is going to be underwater, so it's not going to happen.
At some point, that may be true. And everybody says, see, that's what's great about living in the Great Lakes and being an Ohioan. Everybody in the South is thirsty, and they're going to get.
It will no longer be well hung. It's just going to be real scrub down there.
Well, on that note, Bob, Jarrod, thank you very much for. Go ahead, Bob. You were going to say?
Yeah, no, go ahead. Go ahead. Continue to
Jarrod, thank you for your time. I told you, Bob, Jarrod was going to be great. I mean, he just knows so much. It's so deep.
I feel less stupid now than I did at the beginning of the broadcast, even with a bowling shirt on. So I think it was fantastic. Jarrod, thank you. So thank you for spending your time. Like I feel like we got like a CNN or Fox News quality expert with us and just little old us. So we really appreciate you spending the time with us tonight. And I think that the people that were here with us tonight really got a lot of information that I think we all need. So very good. Thank you. Hats off.
Yep.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Jarrod.
I had a blast doing it, honest to God. Well, I hope to do it again, and you guys stay safe, all right?
All right. Thanks, Jarrod.
All right. Thanks, Jarrod. All right. Well, do you want to go? By the way, Big Dave, great show. Bob, Mike, and Jarrod.
Yeah.
Thank you, Big Dave.
Thanks, BD.
We work hard on this.
See you tomorrow.
Mike works hard.
What do you mean?
Before
look at that, I got it.
I know.
Go ahead.
There we go. We do. Where is our? I loaded that video, and we do have a. If I can get it, I thought I had it loaded, and now here we go. I was all excited to do this, and now I've ruined it again. Because we have a report from the field, from our wine expert, Jarrod, and I uploaded it, and it didn't go. So we'll just have to wait for it to percolate for a second. So let's before we do that, let's kind of do a little post-mortem on what we just saw, what we just learned, and
Well, I was actually if we're gonna do post-mortem, what's there to post-mortem? I mean, Jarrod was fantastic.
There's no mortem here.
Okay, I mean, Jarrod was great.
You were great.
I would love to have him back on, maybe next Tuesday for a little bit.
Yeah,
to do a little bit of a wrap up for all this stuff.
Yeah, to kind of look, and he's given the thumbs up. He's saying that that he's good for that next week. So.
Oh yeah, great, excellent. Yeah, I think it would be great to have him on for a few minutes to just do some wrap up on all this stuff.
Absolutely, and look at all of our predictions and what we said. We can have little clips of what we said tonight, and we can see if we're fools or if we were smarter than we think we are.
Yeah. Well, who's going to pull those clips? Not me.
You said you had all the technology.
I have the technology. I don't have the time or the ability. Those are the things that I lack.
The only way I'm doing this show with you is if I don't have to do any work, and so far.
And you have held up your end of the bargain very well.
I really have.
The only thing that you continue to trip up on is freezing up. You went against the Googs tonight, and you got hammered.
And I ended up back in Chrome. I don't know how that happened. How the hell did I end up in Chrome? All right, so that's why the file was too large. The limits are 3 megabytes or 100 megabytes for video. How big was this? All right. Well, see, Jarrod sent it in a fully uncompressed. This is all Jarrod's fault.
Yeah, we'll just blame Jarrod.
Yeah, but I really like to play it because it was.
We could play it. Why can't we do it next week? We just play it next week, and he can narrate it.
Give me a second. Just give me a.
Well, we'll talk about my guitar playing right now because my guitar playing is like a romance. You know, it's a very strong love-hate thing, and I'm going to make a confession to you, Bob.
All right.
I've had, for my entire playing career, which is now, well, not a career, but it's lasted about 40 some years. I've played guitar off and on. And I've struggled in one main area. That is the pick. I just have never been comfortable holding a pick. And so recently, I would say over the last 3-4 months, I've been off and on. I'm going to go full Richie Kotzen. And I love it. You know, Richie Kotzen, as you know, Richie does not use a pick.
Right.
Neither does Lindsey Buckingham.
Right.
Or Mark Knopfler. And I got to tell you, I feel free with no pick. Problem is it's beating up my right hand. My thumb is just a big blister. Can you see that at all?
Oh, wow. Look at that.
Huh? How about that? I mean, my thumb is just a blister and it hurts. So, I feel very free I've got 5 picks that I can use, and I like it. And we'll see what happens if I can continue to play. Who knows? Do you have the video up yet, or do I need to continue? Bob, it's late. I'm tired. I want to go to bed.
I know. I'm trying to.
I go to bed early. I get up early. I'm like Ben Franklin. Early to bed, early to rise.
Right. I'm going to turn black for a second. All right.
Okay.
There we go. All right. And then I should.
Now you're gray. You were black. Now you're gray.
I'm gray.
Just like Jarrod. Just like Jarrod Gray, not Jarrod Tudor.
Right. All right. Now that's good. All right.
Why don't you turn me black or gray so I can put my head down?
Deactivate. Activate. There we go. And boom. And nothing. At least you can hear me. That's all right.
Yes.
So Mike,
and by the way, if I ever do keep playing and I ever do get into a band, there's only going to be one drummer I'm ever going to play with, and that's Big Dave. And if we could ever write our theme song, it would have to be, you and me playing the guitars, Big Dave on drums.
Right.
And you'd probably relegate me to bass, which I guess I would probably should be there because you are a far superior guitar player to me.
Well, nothing worked, so I'm gonna say that I love this experimentation with technical stuff. Like while we're doing it, I think it's really great.
This is the perfect live performance. You never know what's going to happen.
You
never know.
And yeah, it's just I apologize for not coming through the video, but I'll tell you that Jarrod Gray did a really nice video, and we'll show it to you next week.
Yeah, that's great. Great.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, like our relationship always is, you get the first word, the last words, and a lot of the middle ones. So take us out. All
right, I will. And you know what I'm going to do? I will use our theme song to take us out. And let's see. seems a little loud, so I'll reach over and turn it down. But hey, thanks for everybody for joining us, especially Jarrod Tudor, font of information. I think we all learned a lot and have a better understanding of what's going on with this election. So Jarrod, thanks for that. Mike Stoffer, thank you so much for being with us. And of course, thanks to everybody that joined us and took the time to watch and comment and all that. We'll be back next week for another edition. We'll wrap up the election with Jarrod Tudor on another edition of I Didn't Know That. For Mike Stoffer, I am Karaoke Bob. Have a good night. And if you voted, thank you so much for taking part in the great American experiment. This is I Didn't Know That. Have a good night, everybody.